So in this video, we're going to be talking about water ingress. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is a massive myth that has been going around in the caravan industry for years. And it's actually been perpetuated by some of the major press. So the Practical Caravan magazine recently did an article about how to buy a caravan. So obviously I was watching it, I was looking at it to see if I could get any tips. So what they were saying was that to be able to see if you've got water ingress in the caravan, you can smell it. So if you go into a caravan and you can smell that the caravan is damp, that's a sure sign it's got water ingress. They also said that you would see spores on the upholstery and maybe on the blinds, and sometimes you'll get green kind of mist forming on the work surfaces and on the cupboards as well, like a film of mold and mildew. Now, that is true. You can smell damp, you can't smell water ingress. So let me say that again. You can smell damp, you can't smell water ingress. I would say 99% of the customers that come to me wanting to sell their caravan will say, oh, it's not got any damp in it because I can't smell any. Well, again, they might be right. It hasn't got any damp in it, doesn't necessarily mean it hasn't got water ingress. And this is the issue, the confusion between what water ingress is and what damp is. So let's break it down a little bit. So damp is if you've locked the caravan up for 6 months and it's in a damp and warm environment like we got down here in Cornwall. It's pretty warm compared to the rest of the country, and also very wet. So if you are in that environment and you've locked the caravan up and the air can't get around it, you will get damp in that caravan. It's the same as if you shut a house up over winter and didn't have any heating on, you come to open it up in the spring, it's going to smell damp. It's just the way it is. Now, the manufacturers have had a few issues over the years because they need to get ventilation in the caravan, enough to satisfy the gas regs and also to stop condensation, but they don't want too much ventilation so that the wind whistles through it and they can't get their grade 3 insulation. Because then what happens is the customer gets duct tape and puts it all over the vents, and that's not good for the gas regs. That's another story. So they have this trouble with trying to get enough ventilation but not too much. So then if you put the caravan into storage for 6 months or a few months even in a warm, wet environment, and maybe there's other caravans next to it, maybe it's next to a hedge, you've got trees over it, then it's going to suffer from not being able to have enough ventilation, and therefore that's when you're going to get kind of a damp environment in the caravan. That's when you start to get mold and mildew appear. So you get that dusty stuff on the upholstery, on the cupboards that does wipe off. Now you can get mold spores on the upholstery and also on the blinds, and in worst cases they go black and you can't get them out. So damp is a problem, but not so much of a problem as water ingress is, and it's this confusion between the two that is a bit frustrating, because the public don't know that there's a difference between the two. And then with the Caravan Club not the Caravan Club, that's wrong, Practical Caravan saying things like that, then a customer will go into a caravan in the middle of summer, go, oh, it's got no water ingress because I can't smell any. Well, of course, that's not the case. So that's my 2 penneth of that out of the way, because it is a bit of a frustration, as you can probably tell. So you can't smell water ingress, you can probably smell damp. There's a few issues with damp, but a good air out and a clean, and they're pretty much gone. So that's damp. What's water ingress? Well, water ingress is when the integrity of the caravan on the outside has broken down for some reason. It can be the awning rail, sealant behind the awning rail has gone, if it's too old or dried out. It can be the sealant around the roof lights in the roof has failed and letting water in. It can be cracks in the rear panel, as I was going over in the external bit of this section of the videos. You can get water ingress through the window rubbers. It doesn't matter how good the construction method is on the caravans, which I'll get to in a sec. If you've got a window rubber, it can fail and it can let water in. So it can get in there as well. Anywhere that is a joint in the caravan, it can get water in it for various different reasons. So why is water ingress bad? Well, if you buy a caravan at full retail price and it's got water ingress in it, it can be a costly affair. So the very small amount is going to be £500, and then up to, I mean, we've just done a job and it was around £4,500 to repair it all. Now, the problem with it is you can't tell how bad it is until you start stripping it apart. So a small piece of water ingress that doesn't look too bad can be a big job when you actually start stripping it out. So it's mainly the cost implications and the hassle and the time as well, but it's mainly cost. So if you bought a caravan for £15,000, it's got £4,000 worth of water ingress in, obviously you're either going to have to sell it cheap or you're going to have to get that work done, and it's not covered by insurance. So if you've got insurance, they won't cover it. So just a note here, I am talking about a certain type of caravan, so it's the ones with wooden construction in. So pretty much all of them before 2010, then from 2010-11, Bailey started doing their Alitech, but that's a different kettle of fish. So I'll go through that in a separate video. So we're not talking about the Bailey Alitech at the moment. And then when you got with the Swift products, once you got to 2015, they started using GRP and polyurethane. So again, there's going to be a separate set of videos on that as well, because that's a different type of problem that we're seeing there. So this is to do with the wooden construction in the caravans from around about 2010 and up to 2014-15 in the Swift caravans. Sorry, had a customer. So how do you spot water ingress? Remember, not damp, water ingress. Well, I've been in the industry 30 years and I've been buying caravans for 20 years, and I've got a £400 damp meter, and I still find it very difficult to spot. So this is going to be the best kind of idea of what you to look for, but you can still miss it. I still miss it. And the guys in the workshop take great pleasure in telling me when I have missed it. So I do my best to try and find it, but even so, having said that, I want to buy the caravan. So and you might be in that same situation actually. It's a good point, is you're desperate to buy this caravan, so you don't want to find anything. But it is important to look at it and look at it objectively, so that if you do find something, make a proper decision on it. Don't get carried away with the how great the rest of the van looks, because it could lend you up in trouble. I mean, from my point of view, if I get it wrong, the guys fix it. It's not the end of the world. But yeah, in your case, it could cost thousands. So where do you look? Well, it can be anywhere, but there are places where it can be more troublesome than others. So if you have a look in the corners where the side meets the end panels, like I said in the previous video, the panels can crack and let water ingress in there. Also, the awning rail side is more prone to it rather than the non-awning side, because if you put an awning up and you've got a storm, and it's going to be pulling on that awning rail, so that could be a bit more troublesome on the near side than the off side. Around the window rubbers, have a look underneath the window rubbers to have a look there, and around the toilet is also quite a good place for it to find it. You can have a look on the floors. I'll get to the floors in a minute, because they're not so bad on this type of caravan. On some of the others they are, but on this type of caravan we're talking about with the wood, they're not so bad. So I'm really saying kind of look everywhere in the cupboards and everywhere you can possibly look, but some places are worse than others. Around the front of the caravan as well, because the window rubbers can let water in as well. Where the rain runs down the front of the caravan and is constantly on that, then that could be an area that you need to really concentrate on. So how to find it? Well, as I said a second ago, I have got a damp meter. I say damp meter, I shouldn't say that, I should say water ingress meter, but I'll keep calling it damp meter because it's easier to say, or meter. So I've got a meter, and again it's a Survey Master, and it cost me 450 odd pounds, and it scans the walls. Now you can get cheaper versions of that, and up until very recently I was always saying that they weren't very good. There's two types. There's ones that you can use that prong the walls, and there's ones that scan. And up until recently the scanning ones weren't really available. You could get a cheap one that you could prong the walls with, but they leave vampire marks everywhere. And I think if you went to a seller's caravan and you started putting these things in the walls everywhere, they wouldn't be very happy, and it really annoys me if I see it. So recently I found one on Amazon for 35 quid that was really good, and I have actually done another video comparing it to my Survey Master, and it stands up really well. So watch that video and you might want to invest in one. For 35 quid on Amazon, I don't think you can go wrong. And even if you don't use it to buy a new caravan, which you probably will, then it's good to have, because if you own a caravan you can keep an eye on the water ingress situation, month after month. If you can get a water ingress meter, then that's good. £35 off Amazon, like I said. Now you have to know how to read them. If you scan the walls, you might get a higher reading, but sometimes you can get metal behind the panels, especially in the corners and things like that, where the construction has to be kind of firmed up a little bit. So sometimes you might get metal behind the wallboard, and that will give the same reading as if it's got water ingress. Now you can tell if it's metal because it will be high reading, and then if you move it a couple of centimeters over, it will go directly to green. Now water ingress tends to start at the top and kind of fan out like that. If you've got a nice straight line, it's more than likely metal than water ingress. But all these things I'm going to tell you in a minute are guides. So especially with the meter, actually the meter will give you an idea of where something might be, and then you look for some of these other secondary kind of symptoms that I'm going to be talking about now. So if you scan the walls with the meter and you get a reading, that is the earliest sign that you're going to see it, because if it's got in there fairly recently, it hasn't had time to do any damage to the wallboard, so there's no physical signs. So that's where you then start looking for secondary signs. The next sign you'll see would be a staining of the wallboard. So if you can have a look in the corner and see the wallboard is starting to stain, and it's a slightly different colour than the other one, and it shouldn't be, then that's an indication that you've had water ingress in there and it's started to affect the wallboard itself. So after the staining, you then get, it starts to kind of deform the wallboard itself. So a good way of doing it, if you haven't got a meter, is if you can use your fingernails, if you tap a part of the wall that is sound, that you know is sound, and then tap a bit that you think is a little bit suspect, it will sound different. It's kind of like the difference between tapping a hardback book and then a paperback book. You'll notice the difference. And then you can physically hear a different sound. It'll kind of sound dull and thuddy. And that's an indication that there's water ingress got there. Then you can feel it, you can press it in and it will go a little bit spongy, it will give under the thumb press, whereas a decent bit won't give under the thumb press. You also get pimpling. Now, pimpling's a bit odd. I've had pimpling where the caravan, the wallboard is actually showing no signs of water ingress. There's no reading and it's not spongy or anything like that. But there's lots of little black pimples on it. Now they are spores that are present in the wallboard when it was made, and they start to grow when they get any kind of indication of moisture. So say water's got down behind it, those spores will sense that and start to grow. I didn't know what they were for years until I went into a caravan that was been left for 5 years, and there was a great big bubble in the side of the van. So I kind of cut it open, there's a mushroom in there. And there were lots of these pimplings around. So it is the spores growing. So if you see those, then there's not much you can do. You're going to have to replace that panel. Then we have the window rubber. Like I said before, anywhere that's got window rubber, it can fail. It doesn't matter how good the construction method is. The way to have a look and make sure that the window rubber is sound is by peeling up the window rubber in the middle or around the corners and having a look at the wood that actually forms the structure around the window. Now if that looks nice and clean like the day it was put in there, then that's fine. If you've got any water on that, it starts to go dull and you can see the difference. Sometimes you can physically see the water there. As that gets worse, it will get darker and darker and darker until the point where it's just rotten. If that's the case, then normally the wallboard underneath that would have gone as well, because obviously the water is going to go downwards and start affecting everything else around it. So you then have to replace that whole section and the stuff around the window as well. So floors, not so bad in these caravans made out of wood, because generally the wallboard will soak up all the damage before it gets down to the floor, so it's not allowed to get there. Again, it's different in the Baileys, and watch that video to find out what's going on there. But the one place to look on the floors is actually underneath, in the corners. If you can get underneath the caravan and look up and just kind of poke your finger around, see if there's any damage there at all. Before I go any further, I'd like to give this a bit of context actually, which I should have done a bit earlier. If you find water ingress, it depends on how old the caravan is and also the value of it. If you're looking at paying £5,000 for a caravan and it's an older one and there's a little bit of water ingress in it, it might not be too much of a problem. If it can survive within the timescale that you're going to want to own it, so a £5,000 caravan, say you kept it for 4 or 5 years, then it's kind of paid for itself. So a little bit of water ingress isn't the end of the world. It's when you get up to like, you know, 10, 15,000 pounds, and it's got 4,000 pounds worth of water ingress in. And believe me, they are out there, those vans. That's when you've got a problem. That's when you need to have it addressed, and you're going to have a problem because it's going to cost you money rather than the previous owner. So what can you do about it if you do find it? Well, if you're looking at a private caravan, I would probably walk away. It's a bit different for me because I've got a bit of experience to how much these things are going to cost. But if you've got no idea, then you could find water ingress, and it might be a £500 job, it might be a £4,000 job. And even with us, we don't really know until we take the van out. I've certainly been in a situation where you thought, oh, that's a 5-minute job, and then 3 days later we're still pulling damp wood out. So it's not easy for you to tell what the cost implications of that are. Again, if it's an older caravan and you can knock it off, you know, knock the van down by £500, then that's great. But if you're talking about a newer caravan and it's, you know, a significant issue, then I would probably recommend walking away. My advice here would probably be to buy from a dealer, because you don't have to worry about any of this, because they will go through it and then you'll get warranty. But I would still get that meter, because if it is under warranty, then it's a good idea to check it just before the warranty runs out. Either you can do that with your meter, or you can pay someone to do it. I have had situations where a customer's bought one off a dealer, and there's been water ingress in there and it's been under warranty, and they bought it in for some other reason, we've happened to have seen it, and then that's, you know, been a problem. I'm not going to say we've never missed it, because I've never quite got to the bottom of how quickly this water ingress actually arrives. We've swore blind that the caravan's been dry. It's gone out 3 months later. We've had an issue with water ingress. Now, I don't know how quickly these things can actually materialise. So I've never quite got to the bottom of that. All I do know is the quicker you find it, the easier it is to replace or fix, and maybe seal the problem up and let the van dry out. So I think that's most of it. There's not much more I can go through. So remember, you can smell damp, you can't smell water ingress. Damp is different to water ingress. So damp, you'll have spores, you'll have a smell, but it is because the caravan's been shut up. You open it all up again, give it a good old clean, and that problem will go. Water ingress, the van's integrity's gone, so the water's getting into the caravan. It's bad because it's going to cost you money if you buy a caravan at full retail and it's got it in it. It's hard to spot, and like I said, I've been doing this 30 years, I still miss it. Look in the corners, around the toilet, everywhere you possibly can, and the roof as well, don't forget the roof. The meters, that £35 one's really good. I would invest in one of those, but you need to know how to use it to kind of interpret the readings that you're getting. If you gave a meter to 10 different people and said go and test that caravan, you're likely to get 10 different variations on what they say, and they all say that the last person didn't know what they were talking about. So, you know, you'd be aware of that. You can use your fingernails to test the panels to see if you can hear that different kind of noise. Pimpling is also an issue. Pull up the window rubbers and have a look underneath, and check the floors underneath in the corners. And again, not the end of the world if there's a little bit there, but if your corner steady's starting to pull away, then obviously not great. So that's the water ingress. It is probably one of the most important things to understand and to avoid, but be realistic with it. Like I said, if it's an older caravan, it might not be too bad if you got a little bit in there.